All right, welcome to Mississippi State Postgame Live here on the Voice of College Football. I'll let a few more people trickle in before we get going. Mississippi State falls to Georgia in Starkville. We'll talk about that game. But yeah, I'm going to let a few people try to get in to the show before we really dive into it. But, not a game that was the most fun for Mississippi State by any means. Pretty much just get worked against Georgia, as Texas A&M just pulled off a very nice fake punt for a massive gain. Good for them, I suppose. Yeah, we'll sit here for a sec, let a few more people get in here, and then we'll roll from there once a few people start to trickle in. But as you are trickling in, or if you're watching this after the fact, we'll greatly appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Turn those notification bells on so you do know when we do go live. And if you could share the stream, share the channel, tell people about us, we would certainly appreciate that. Because we want to be able to have much people in here whenever we're talking about Mississippi State getting just skull drug against Georgia. Because, my goodness, that was a stupid throw, Marcel Reed. Okay. 41-21, and it really wasn't that close. Georgia just completely whips Mississippi State. Ugly on both sides of the ball. Defensively, you looked a lot like the 2024 team, and just in terms of kind of complete ineptitude and not being able to do much of anything whatsoever. Offensively, started off strong, good scripted drive, and then after that, just couldn't do much of anything whatsoever. And Georgia defensively this year has been a team that's pretty good about adjusting to whatever they see, and they adjusted pretty quick. They didn't need halftime adjustments. They were able to make first quarter adjustments after Mississippi State moved down the field against them, which, look, to be fair, only a couple offenses have really moved it on Georgia this year, and it's ones that are more talented than Mississippi State. But, yeah, it was not a pretty showing from the State offense either. Bunch of injuries in this game. Isaac Smith goes down. You had lost Albert Reese going into it. Jerome Manning gets ejected. Brian Lanier gets banged up at the end. I didn't see if he came back in the game, which at that point it was late in the game, so what would even be the point of that? So your safety room was really decimated. Javen James went down, so you're already thin at offensive line, and that group did not play well. So you lose another body there, which is just not at all ideal. Really just a poor outcome for Mississippi State in a lot of facets. And obviously, you get a lot of Kamario Taylor. That's kind of the one bright spot, is you got a pretty healthy dose with him playing most of the second half for Mississippi State, minus one drive. So you get to see a big chunk of him and him get experience against a good defense. Did a few good things, did some not so good things, but also wasn't really put in a great position either way. But that was kind of a launching off point. I guess we can go ahead and just get into it here. We'll see if any more people trickle in. If they don't, that's fine. Whatever. I understand. 5 o'clock is kind of a weird time. I know a lot of people trying to get dinner around now at this point. It was just when it worked for me schedule-wise today. So, 41-21. And as I said at the beginning, it's not that close. Georgia outgains Mississippi State 567-322, so more than 240 more yards of offense than Mississippi State. Big day through the air for Gunnar Stockton. He finishes with 264 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, completing 62% of his passes. The ground game for Georgia, completely dominant. Nate Frazier, 12 carries for 181 yards and a touchdown. Stockton was effective with his legs. Bowens broke off a good run. It was mostly Frazier dominated, but in total, 303 yards for Georgia at 6.9 yards per rush. State just could not stop the Georgia run game whatsoever. It was a lot of Georgia just kind of spamming those runs to the edge, and that was an issue that you had against Arkansas, not being able to set the edge against some of those outside zone and some of those pin and pull type looks. And Georgia hit those pretty heavily in this game. Formationally got Mississippi State into looks they wanted to take advantage of, and really were able to run all over them. I mean, I was surprised Georgia threw the football at all, which, they They had plenty of success doing it, but first couple drives, I'm like, I don't know why you're not just handing it off every single play. And they might have been able to and found success. But big day through the air as well. Zachariah Branch, 8 catches for 68 and a touchdown. Noah Thomas caught a touchdown. I don't even remember his touchdown happening. I guess I kind of just phased out of that one. Oscar Delp, the tight end, had 3 for 41 and a score. A couple other big completions down the field. Really, I mean, Georgia just did what it wanted against State's offense. Their receiving core greatly outmatched Mississippi State, and the big thing were the matchups they were able to get against State safeties and linebackers. Georgia's got some really good tight ends, and they obviously got a slot receiver in Zachariah Branch, who is their top target. But they were really able to take advantage of that matchup quite frequently. Because especially once State's safety started going down, that just made it even worse. Because, again, you lose 2 of your stop guys in the first half. And that really started to snowball. Was it the Jimmys and Joes or the X's and O's? Jimmys and Joes more than anything else. I'm not saying there aren't things that you could look at from a coaching standpoint if you wanted to. And I'll talk about some of the stuff from Jeff Levy today. I actually didn't have an issue with a lot of it, to be honest. I know the 4th down call people are really frustrated with. I've kind of fully settled on. I was okay with that. And look, Coleman Hutzler, I think at this point, has shown you enough that you think, okay, clearly you give him better players and he can suddenly call a pretty solid defense. And I think he's done a good job all throughout the season. There's only been one other game. The fourth quarter against Texas is kind of the only time this year where I've looked at what Coleman Hutzler was doing from a game plan standpoint, and I didn't like what they were doing because they kept up a super aggressive approach at a point where Texas had shown they were no longer giving up the pressure and they were connecting on those one-on-one shots down the field. I thought playing a bit more conservatively there, trying to limit the big plays, would have been smarter. That's kind of the one time. I mean, I don't know in this game if there's anything State should have been doing differently. I mean, this is one of those games where the other side just outmatched you so much. I mean, is there something you can be doing schematically better to get your guys to set the edge? I don't know, but this is one of those games where your defensive line looked like it looked a season ago. You just get blown back off the line every single play, and then you've got a running back is 5 yards down the field before he's got anybody in the vicinity of him, and they're able to take off. Tell you what, I agree. Our fans need to take a step back and realize the landscape, message board in shambles. Yeah, no, look, it's going to be that way after every single loss, especially if you get blown out. People are going to be really upset. Look, I mean, I'll be honest, for my mental state, I mean, y'all saw me after the Texas game. I'm much better after a blowout loss than I am after a loss like how they lost to Texas. I mean, now I also go in knowing Georgia's a much better team than Texas. I think Texas is starting to hit its stride a little bit. I'm sure they'll make it somewhat interesting next week, but I think Georgia, what you saw today, and I'm not trying to do revisionist history here. I understand that there was all the talk throughout the week is this is a trap game for Georgia. Georgia could lose this football game. Mississippi State has a chance. And then and then you see Georgia get the blowout, and then I don't want to turn it into, well, you guys said they had a chance, and then Georgia blows them out, and you start talking about how good Georgia is. I think the version of Georgia you saw today is a version of Georgia that absolutely could compete with just about anybody. I don't know if you're touching Ohio State at this point. That's probably just the best team in the country by a pretty significant margin, especially with Indiana barely getting by against Penn State today. Although, look, to be fair, everybody gets one, right? You get the one game or you maybe have to get lucky, maybe things go your way. So I guess we can't hold that against the Hoosiers too much. But I think you have a Georgia team that has done a lot of things really well. They're not overly impressive in any one category compared to where they've typically been, but they run the ball well. Stockton does a good job of taking care of the football and making good decisions. He's accurate in the passing game. He's a number in the run game. I think they've got enough weapons in the receiving core. The offensive line is good. They're very good at stopping the run. Pass defense, they have been susceptible downfield for sure, but they get stops in the red zone. And they've ultimately, everything we've said about their defense, despite all the numbers not popping off, look what they did in the second half and in overtime against Tennessee. Look at what they did in the fourth quarter against Ole Miss. Second half against Alabama. And that offense is good as it's been this year. They shut out Alabama in the second half. Georgia defensively is still really good. Just because they're not getting sacks and not getting turnovers doesn't mean they're not a really good defense. They still are. I think Mississippi State should have been able to better attack them than they were. I'm not saying State couldn't have found more success, but ultimately you kind of understand some of it where you faced a really good defense and it was able to really limit your offense. State's offensive line banged up going into it, and Georgia was able to outmatch you. Let's get in. I mean, we'll start big picture here. In the big picture, and I know we just hit on a lot of this, but you lost to a better team, and you lost by a lot to a better team. And we can dissect individual plays and moments all we want, and we'll get into some of that going forward in this. I've got things for the offense that I pointed out. Defensively, I don't know if so much individual play. Oh, there's one big moment for sure. We can look at specific moments that if you want to be frustrated with them, you're more than welcome to. But at the end of the day, why did Mississippi State lose this game and get blown out? Because Georgia's just a much better football team than they are. And if you look at Mississippi State year after year after year, and this includes good Mississippi State teams that have far more talent than this team did, and teams that are not in a rebuild like this Mississippi State team did, they've gotten blown out by one of the better teams in the conference, with some of those games happening at home. I guess a lot of them are on the road, but they've had games like that on the road. At home. When you play a team that is as talented as Georgia, you basically have to play perfect. And Mississippi State didn't play perfect. And I'm not saying you can't be frustrated with that. But it's also a case of, I think State could have played a lot better today, and it still probably doesn't determine the final result because of how well Georgia played. Because, talking about State's defense, I kind of already mentioned, I don't really know what else State's defense was supposed to do. I don't. That's not something where I look at that and say the defense just made a ton of mistakes. I think it was mostly you were just outmatched. And then I look on the other side of the ball, and yeah, there were plays to be had offensively. You could have put some more points on the board. You're ultimately just talking about making the game look a little bit more respectable. I think it's still a loss, no matter how you spin it. And I know the final outcome matters to fans in terms of the margin because, of what looks better. Getting blown out looks a lot worse than keeping it somewhat competitive. I think this was going to be a loss regardless. I don't know what the path for State winning would have been other than State plays its absolute A game. And then I think you would have had to have seen the Georgia team we've seen much of the season, which is one that gets off to slow starts and has kind of had to figure things out as the game has gone along. That wasn't the case with Georgia today. They came out firing. They really did. And some of that is just matching up with State's offense better, right? That's a part – matching up with State's defense better, rather, and being able to take advantage of it. That's some of it. Credit to Kirby. Don't overlook us in game plan accordingly, just outplayed by a much better team. Yeah, I agree. Like, you got beat by a lot now because you played by a much better team. Now, and I will say, and I've got notes on this stuff, I understand where all the frustrations come from. Like, specifically for this game, even if you don't go big picture of, it's always going to be frustrating getting blown out at home. And I think fans are so desperate to finally break through and get back that every time you take one of these losses, it just is more and more frustrating. I get all that. But specifically for this game, right, I just kind of talked about it. Georgia this season has not played complete games. They have looked suspect at times. They have looked mortal. They have been in down-to-the-wire games against teams that Mississippi State went down to the wire with. Right? They were right there with Florida, right there with Tennessee. Two teams Mississippi State didn't beat but could have beaten. And obviously, we saw them against Auburn, where that was a game that they were trailing at halftime. And we know Auburn's not a very good team. So, one, Georgia looks susceptible. They're coming off a rivalry win. They got Texas next week. They're coming to your house. You feel good about this could be a week we could pull an upset. And like this Georgia team looks more beatable than any Georgia team we've seen in recent years. Then you add in for Mississippi State, you're coming off a win. You got that momentum against Arkansas. Now, you could spin it another way and say the fact that Mississippi State needed a comeback like they did against Arkansas and was frankly fortunate to get that win, all things considered, that thinking they were going to have a chance against Georgia was probably a bit overly positive, I suppose. But if you want to talk about things purely from a momentum standpoint, I know that that's been kind of a talking point from a lot of people is if this team could get one, they're going to find more. And they're going to have an opportunity. And look, it makes sense, right? You get the breakthrough, and then you think you're going to find another win somewhere else along the way. And it ultimately just doesn't happen. So you create these expectations. We have a chance to win this game. So when not only do you not win, you get obliterated, you're going to be frustrated. So and a few things on that. And one, compared to the other opponents. Because I know we could talk about, well, how is it that these teams State were competitive with were able to be competitive with Georgia? Because that's one of the talking points is, well, why are we just okay with that? Yeah, you could say it's just a better team. Why are we supposed to just be okay with that? If these other teams were able to be competitive with Georgia, why couldn't we? And you look at teams like Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Auburn. And what I say for those teams where it's different than Mississippi State, those teams all have flaws. Those teams have all have things where they get in their own way. You know, Tennessee defensively, they got a good defensive front, but other than that, their defense is incredibly suspect. You can have a lot of success against the Tennessee defense. As long as you don't give up a million sacks, you're probably going to have a big day against Tennessee on offense. And I think Tennessee's offense has sort of started to come back down to earth a little bit. Florida, offensively, just not good. They got talent, but they're not good. Auburn, offensively not good. I guess they're scoring points today against Vanderbilt post Hugh Freeze, but offensively they have been a bad team. Offensively, they have found ways to get in their own way. Same with Florida. Those are two teams that have continually found ways to screw it up. Those two teams are also just very poorly coached from the head coaching position. All three of those teams, though, there's a pretty key difference. With Tennessee, it's the most obvious that, hey, man, that offense is just complete top to bottom. And I know, as I said, they kind of started to fade, but that's a good Tennessee offense in all facets. They don't have a true obvious weakness on offense. They have parts of them that are better than others, but they have an excellent group of skill players. The quarterback is good enough. I think the offensive line is good enough. Got a great play caller. That's an offense that's going to be able to put points on the board pretty much every single week against everybody they play. They're a more talented offense than Mississippi State, much more talented offense than Mississippi State. It makes sense they were able to challenge Georgia more than Mississippi State could. They also, as I mentioned, have a really good pass rush. Having pass rush, if you're going to have one thing on defense, have that, because it gives you a chance to make those big plays that can be difference makers. So, yeah, Tennessee has their flaws. We've seen Tennessee lose, but they got a really good offense and a group that gets after the quarterback. They've been able to win games because of that. They were able to be competitive with Georgia because of that. Auburn's defense is great. Auburn's defense has been fantastic all year. And it's also Jordan-Hare at night. And I know we love Davis Wade, and Davis Wade can be an incredibly difficult place to play. We saw it be that earlier this season against Arizona State. Jordan-Hare at night is something different. Auburn's defense is something different. They were able to challenge Mississippi State in that way, and Auburn offensively, the reason Auburn had hype going into the season is that there is some talent on that side of the ball, like some big-time players. And it's one of those things when you have certain pieces, you hope, can they put it together and do enough? Florida, it's kind of this exact same story. Florida's got a good defense. Florida's got an offense that's got some really good weapons across several positions. Florida's got a good offensive line. Like, there's a reason Florida was a team that people were hyping up going into the season, is they've got enough pieces you can look at and think, all right, that group could be really good if it all clicks. Those are all teams that have a ceiling of competing with Georgia. And I'll add for Florida, that's a rivalry game, right? That adds to the juice of it all. Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, yeah, Mississippi State, and I know we didn't play Auburn, but Auburn's not a very good team. But, Tennessee and Florida, Mississippi State could go toe-to-toe with those teams because those teams are flawed. Florida, we've continually seen them get in their own way and find ways to lose games. Tennessee has enough issues defensively that you can find success against that team. And they're not perfect offensively. They're really good, but they're not perfect. Auburn, obviously, all the issues they have offensively and all the issues with Hugh Freeze coaching that team. Those teams can all find ways to lose to a team like Mississippi State. They're also talented enough that they can go toe-to-toe with Georgia. That if they put it together and they play well, they can compete. They're capable of making plays that are going to give Georgia problems with regularity, at least. Mississippi State's not there. Now, I think if Mississippi State was playing its absolute best and then you also had Georgia struggling, maybe this game goes differently. But Mississippi State having the issues that it does against the Georgia team playing lights out, they didn't have a chance. Like that's ultimately what it boils down to. You played a far better team, and I don't think you can look at some of these other results and look at those and say, oh, well, those teams were able to be close to Georgia. Why couldn't we? That all makes a pretty big difference. Another comment here. Am I crazy for thinking Levy has done a good job playing up with these teams with inferior talent? Bad decisions at times, but dang, we have to play all out to get there. Hard to do it every single week. I think that's fair. Look, they've gotten the team to play hard, and they have found ways to give them opportunities in games. I know the execution has lacked in key moments, and there have been decisions Levy has made that have been frustrating at times, but they do, frankly, get a pretty good effort week in and week out. I think this is just a case of, again, like sometimes the effort only goes so far. And like I said, we've had the games like this at Mississippi State year after year after year. Dan Mullen had plenty of games like this, including late in his tenure. Mike Leach obviously had games like this. And I'm not saying that at the time people weren't frustrated with those games. I know Mike Leach. This game, because speaking of Leach, this game most reminds me of the games against Alabama in 2021 and 2022. Because those were Alabama teams that looked mortal. Those were Alabama teams that week in and week out found themselves just not looking all that great. They'd go up against teams that they were expected to beat by a lot, and they would just kind of be in fourth quarter, it'd be a battle. And, we saw them take some losses that previously Saban teams hadn't taken a loss like that. And because of that, I remember going into the 21 and 22 Alabama games, there were questions, can Mississippi State do what those other teams are doing? And can Mississippi State do what these other teams have done against Alabama? Despite State never being able to get anything done against Alabama, can State go into those games and compete? And both times you get blown out. And obviously people were plenty frustrated because in that moment it's like, what is it that's wrong with us that everybody else can figure out a way to be competitive with Alabama, but we cannot? And I don't have an answer for that. I genuinely couldn't tell you what it is those other teams were doing that they were able to be competitive in those moments, but Mississippi State was not able to. And it's very similar this week around with Georgia, where a lot of the frustration, it's not even that you got blown out. It's that you got blown out when other teams have been competitive. And like I explained, I don't think you can fully compare to some of those other teams, but just you look across college football and you see the teams in Mississippi State's point right now, and they're like, well, they're able to fight. So, like, is it too much to ask to not get blown out at home against Georgia when they look like a vulnerable team? I understand that sentiment, but I think you just have to big picture understand where this program is at. This is still year 2 of a major rebuild. The roster is night and day better from a season ago. They still do not have the talent and top end. They still do not have the depth and top end talent to expect that they can go toe to toe with Georgia, and they're not at a point where they can't not get blown out, where they're not above losing that way. And as annoying as it is, it's like, well, why did Georgia have to have their get right game this week? Well, why could we not do what these other teams did? I think you have to put it from a Mississippi State vacuum of they just played a much better team and got beat, and they're not in a position yet where you can be saying, I've seen a few of the takes is like it shouldn't be too much to expect us to not get blown out at home. You're going to get blown at home sometimes. You're Mississippi State. And I know I just said that, and someone's going to be like, that's loser mentality, that's poor old State. Mississippi State, the way it is right now, is going to lose a game like that every now and then. That's just going to happen if you're playing a team like this. And to me, it's not some indictment on the program under Jeff Levy. It may be more of, it just is more of a case of like, hey, this thing still has to get built up. And if Levy is still the coach a few years from now and games like this are still happening, then it becomes a different conversation. But for right now, I think you should all be honest with yourselves for a second. And I guess I'm being hypocritical right now because I've talked about changing expectations from preseason to during the season. But did any of you go into the season thinking there's not going to be a week or multiple where Mississippi State would get blown out? And frankly, I'll be honest, that's one where even knowing what we've seen this season, it doesn't change my mindset because we have seen Mississippi State teams much better than this one get blown out in games. Like the talent is not so spread out in college football now that a result like this just isn't going to happen. So I know I just spent 15 minutes talking on all that, but I think we have to, big picture, just look at this. Why did this game happen? You played a team that's a lot better than you, that's in a much better position than you. You were not ready to be in this moment. And I don't mean you weren't ready and that Jeff Lebby didn't have you prepared or that he's not coaching you well. You weren't ready for this moment because the program is just not there yet. It's not built up yet. You don't have the players for this type of a game. And right now, that's okay. This is not the goal right now. Like, the goal is getting back to making a bowl game. That's the other thing is, we're talking about, can we just have a week where we don't get blown out? But we're talking about a team where the expectation is go to get 6 wins. Like, people are saying, we shouldn't be getting blown out in some of these games. 6-6 teams, I'm telling you, get blown out. Usually multiple times per year. That's just kind of where you're at right now. And I'm not saying don't be frustrated. I'm not telling you can't feel however you want to feel. Obviously, like I said, a couple weeks ago in Texas, I had my massive meltdown and said, we're going nowhere. But this is one where I think you just have to look at it and understand, all right, yeah, this is something they still have to work for. Another comment, the poor old take is so tired, it's just realistic. Our fans have very little concept, big picture. We are. Yeah, no, I think poor old is assuming Mississippi State can't do anything and saying we're not going to put any kind of effort towards being as good as we possibly can. Saying the truth about the situation and understanding hey, sometimes you're just going to get the crap beat out of you. That's kind of being more realistic. And again, if we're talking about this program multiple years down the line and this is the same thing happening, that's a different conversation. This is still a major rebuild. It was totally fair to be optimistic going into this game. I'm not telling anybody you shouldn't have been optimistic. I get all the reasons why people felt State could have a chance today. I think Georgia just played as well as they have played all season. And I don't even think that's all an indictment on Mississippi State. I think Georgia played a complete game. They were ready to go in this one. And Mississippi State just wasn't able to keep up. This is far more of a Georgia thing than a Mississippi State thing, if we're being completely honest. Now, diving into more of the Mississippi State side of it, and I'll start with the offense here. Look, the opening drive was fantastic. 14 plays, 75 yards, go down, punch it in for the touchdown. I really liked what I saw from Jeff Lebby on that drive. Using the quick passing game early on, I thought was a smart move because that's how, if you go and you look back at Ole Miss, who does obviously a lot of things similar on offense, that's how they attacked. It wasn't taking a bunch of shots down the field. It was mostly trying to be quick, efficient passes, get the ball out of Trinidad Chambliss' hands, let him work the way down the field. I think that's the best thing to do with Blake Shapen. If you sit back in the pocket, even against the Georgia team that we know the pass rush has not been great this season, it's been very hit or miss. Are they going to have time or are we not? You're on a quick game, you should have time. And I thought they were doing a good job working their way down the field with that, having just enough success in the run game to let that be a part of things and kind of keep the chains moving and stay ahead of the chains. And then obviously punching in with Camario there down at the goal line. Really good, great drive. You just couldn't keep the momentum going. And there's a couple parts to it, and I think it's kind of all phases, from the run game thing. And on the day, sack adjusted, Mississippi State ran for 171 yards, 4.3 yards per rush. Honestly, it's about as good as they could have asked for against Georgia. They were not consistent with the run. And a lot of their rushing success really came once Camario Taylor was in the game, just scrambling over anything else. There were good runs in the first half, don't get me wrong. Booth and Bothwell both had their moments of running well. But it felt like what would happen is they couldn't get consecutive good runs There were a couple times, but it would kind of be like, here's a 5-yard run or here's a 10-yard run, and then this one gets stuffed. And they were very much going back and forth between like, okay, we can set our, we pick up 5 yards on first down running. We want to run it again. And then all of a sudden, well, it's 3rd and 5 again. Or 3rd and 2, we run it for a first down and we run back-to-back times for a total of 3 yards. And now we're in 3rd and long. I don't know if that exact situation happened in this game. I just know like that's how it felt pretty consistently. So I felt like there was a little bit of a commitment to a run game that maybe there shouldn't have been. And again, I know they ultimately ran the football pretty effectively, all things said and done, against Georgia, but the lack of consistency with it, it wasn't like they were just gashing them on the ground. Like they were, excuse me. It was very up and down in the run game, and not being able to be consistent with it is why you couldn't consistently put together drives. The quick passing game part of it, I loved that approach early on. Georgia adjusted to it, and then State just really been able to build out of it. Because Georgia basically just started playing tighter coverage more than anything else. There's a couple times there was a lot of, why are we throwing short of the sticks? And I think it was the game plan was we want the ball out of Blake's hands quickly. And a lot of the designed targets are going to guys who are underneath. A lot of the first read is this guy's underneath. And Georgia basically started playing really tight coverage. I mean, there was one example of that where they have a 3rd down and it's going to Anthony Evans on a slant. And the concept was designed to, it was a man coverage beater, perfect 3rd medium type call. It should be, we're going to get Ant free here. And yeah, the throw's going to be short of the sticks, but he should be open to be able to fall forward for a couple of yards. And Georgia, it was their top corner, Dalen Everett. He just picked it up perfectly. Like it was kind of a pick play, essentially. He handled it perfectly, got in position. Now, it was not a good throw. Shapen threw behind, and it falls incomplete. But if it had been, even if it had been a perfect throw, and it's not excusing Shapen missing, but it could have been a perfect throw, it was going to get tackled for a loss or tackled short of the line to gain. And there was a few times like that, like where some of the space they had early in the game on those underneath throws, Georgia was on top of it a lot quicker. And I think they didn't feel comfortable with the shots down the field, which it feels crazy because Georgia, obviously has not been good with the pass rush this season, one of the worst teams in the country in terms of sack numbers. And they get a couple in this game, end up with 3 total, 2 on Shapen. One of the sacks was an RPO, and it was his first drive of the game. That's one where Georgia had a loaded box against Georgia had the box loaded. RPO rules for Levy, loaded box. You're pulling the ball, you're going to throw. But they had man coverage across the board, and State just couldn't get a receiver open. So because Georgia had numbers, they were going to have a free rusher because they were blitzing in that look. I mean, it wouldn't have worked if you had handed it off. And they were able to beat it there. And like Shapen just has to kind of eat it there. I don't know. You hope that he's able to fire it at the feet of his receiver. But that was one, defense got you more than anything. The second sack later in the game was definitely one where, Levy said as much. Ball's got to get out of Shapen's hands. We've seen what he's done. It's Shapen at this point. He's not going to throw it away when he needs to. That was one the ball had to get out. Look, there were a few times they probably had chances to hit the shots down the field, but I just don't think they felt they were protecting it well enough. And Albert Reese being out, man, hurts things a lot. And offensive line did not play well. Penalties, that was another thing Levy brought up. O-line penalties were a big problem today, putting them in positions to get you find yourself in situations where you could have had a 3rd down and short or be in a 4th and short, where you find yourself on a 4th and short, and if you wouldn't have been there if not for a penalty. If everything else happens equally. That was kind of a big issue. Just a few other things. Shapen's fumble couldn't happen there. You set up Georgia with the short field after you get the big takeaway. If nothing else, you got to punt it away. Fine, you can't fumble there. I'm just trying to read through if I have anything else I wanted to hit on. Okay, so the 4th down, and actually I want to go into the sequence before that because we're going to talk about Camario, and I'll get more into Camario here in a sec. But they have the 4th down situation that they go for, and what sets that up is they got first down inside Georgia territory, down 17-7. You feeling like you're going to be able to come away with points here. And they get backed up, false start. And I don't know if they had already put Camario in, but he sticks with Camario there. I've been a big advocate for playing Camario more, especially these last few weeks. I think giving him series is a good move going forward. And I understand coming into the red zone or in a 3rd and 4th and short because, okay, now this is a situation where we've got a conversion we're trying to pick up and his legs are too valuable to not put him out there. I don't love when we're moving the ball consistently between the 20s and we've already started a drive and then we go bring Camario in. That's something I don't care for because to me, you kill the momentum in that moment and you inevitably put Camario in situations that may not be as favorable for him. For example, Camario being on the field 1st and 15, that's not a situation you want him to be in. You know, I'd rather it be P and 10, or starting off a series, not we just got into Georgia territory after a big play. Let's put Camario in. Oh, crap, we got a false start. Oh, well, we'll leave him in there. Because, you know, the first run, Georgia covers it up quickly. And then he throws the pass downfield, and it's just completely off target. Then you bring Chapin back in, and you run a play clearly to set up the 4th down. So I don't love the idea of we're putting Camario in for 1st and 2nd down, and then it's 3rd and long. All right, go back to Blake. Like, I think you should have kept Blake in the game in that moment. Keep the offense moving along the way you had it. And then if you get to a short yardage, okay, fine, that's a different situation. Now I understand bringing Camario in and getting into a personnel package that is more suitable for this situation. I don't like it when you are coming off hitting a big play and being in position to score. As for the decision to go for the 4th down, I tweeted out that I was 50-50 on it. I'm fully around on I think it was the correct call to go for that 4th down. And I know everyone is screaming about how stupid that decision is because it's, you know, you make it a 1-score game. You never don't make it a 1-score game. You're down 17-10. You feel like you're still in it. Like, what is Levy doing? How on earth do you not take the points there? There's this mentality of you always have to take the points. To me, taking the points in that situation does nothing for you. I talked about going into this game. We did our Thursday show, and we had our guy, Right Yard Services, come be a part of things. And he talked about wanting to see aggressiveness from State and Levy in this game. And I agreed because something I talked about a lot is we saw this with Levy all the time, is Levy would not be aggressive. And Mullen. We saw it with Mullen. Mullen would not be aggressive in key big games. He kind of just would go super conservative. Let's get in and get out. We don't think we're going to have a chance to win. Let's don't do anything where we put anything unique on paper. Let's not even try to make this an interesting game because we don't think we have a chance at it. I don't know. Let's make this game look as respectable as possible from a scoreboard standpoint, which means playing more conservatively. The conservative choice offensively is going to make the score look more respectable at the end, typically, unless you convert on a lot of the aggressive calls. I wanted Levy to be aggressive because you're not going to beat Georgia just going out and playing a normal basic game plan. That means that 4th downs, if you get an opportunity where you think we have a chance, we can go put 7 points on the board, you go for it. That includes that situation right there. If you kick a field goal, all it does is give you 3 more points at the end of the day. And I know that's, well, no duh. You're still losing. You're still losing by a lot. State's defense was not stopping Georgia in this game. We saw it. Look, the first drive, Georgia gets in good position. State gets off the field, wants to force a field goal. The second drive, I don't think that was a fumble, personally. I know why they stuck with the call on the field because technically there was not an angle that showed for sure the ball had not started to move before that receiver who had the jet sweep went down. I think he was down. I don't think that was a fumble. I don't think that should have been Mississippi State ball. And if that's the case, Georgia punches that in for a touchdown. State defensively was not stopping Georgia in this game. And I think Jeff Lebby knew that. I think they knew going into this game, our guys are just not going to be able to match up. If we're going to have a chance, we are going to have to put as many points on the board as possible, which means we cannot settle for 3. Field goals do us no good. We have to score touchdowns. Knowing that, I don't care about the whole make it a 1-score game. I have an opportunity to go put 6 on the board. I think I've got a call where I can set myself up to we can go get a touchdown. Okay. Because if you go for it and you get it, your chances of winning increase. The likelihood that the final outcome is in your favor increase if you convert on a bunch of 4th downs. Now, the flip side to that is if you don't get it, the chances of you getting blown out increase. Because now you're giving the other team more possessions. You're having possessions where we could have pinned them back deeper. We could have kicked a field goal and put in a few points on the board. This goes from being a game that looks respectable on the scoreboard to being a game that we get dominated in. Ultimately, how is that any different than getting blown out, but we kicked a field goal? Because I'm telling y'all now, Georgia still puts 30-plus on the board if State kicks a field goal there. And I don't think State's offense puts 30-plus on the board by kicking a field goal there. Georgia still wins this game and still wins it by a lot. Now, if you want to talk about fan mentality of, well, you know what, that thing, it was close at halftime, or just the thought of we can come back in this thing in the second half, or, you know what, we didn't get completely blown out. That's all stuff that, from a perception standpoint, if you want to talk about perception, go right ahead. And I'm not saying that stuff means nothing. What ultimately matters is the win or the loss. I don't care about keeping it close. I don't. I care about giving you the best chance at winning, which means in a game like this against Georgia, if your best chance of winning, because you know your offense cannot get stops, or your defense can't get stops. It's one thing if your defense is playing really well. If State's defense was playing lights out, all right, kick a field goal, we're down 1 score, we still got a chance here. You knew your defense was not going to get stops. You need touchdowns. I don't care if it increases the likelihood of getting blown out. Give yourself a better chance of winning the football game by going for the 4th down. It is the correct decision to make in this game with all the situations in mind. Now, you could argue from a team psychology standpoint, being down 7 versus being down 10. I don't know. And I'm not saying that stuff's not legitimate. Like, yes, players, like the emotions of it all do matter. But I think there's also a point of saying we're trying to go and find ways to win the football game. And I want to do what is going to give the team the best chance to win. In that case, it was going for the 4th down. Getting to the play call, the decision to run it. And the other comment, Big Fluff gets the first if he catches, thought it was a good chance. Maybe. So they run, it's mesh arrow. So it's basically like it's the mesh concept everyone runs right now, but typically you put the running back on a wheel. In this case, you run him on like a flat route or an arrow route. The read is exactly the same for the quarterback, and you're frankly trying to accomplish the exact same thing. It's just really a different presentation. The whole idea is the running back is going to be your primary read. You're expecting man coverage. You're creating a lot of traffic over the middle of the field with all the crossing routes, and whoever has that running back in man coverage has to work through all the junk to get out in space with him on the arrow route to the sideline and to the flat. So that's who you're trying to get the ball to because you think versus man, he should beat that. And Georgia was in man coverage. They used the motion. Blake sees it's man coverage. And I think as soon as he saw man coverage and he saw Booth get to the flat and he had half a step, boom, throw. It was immediately, I'm going to my first read. That's where I'm going. I think maybe Booth could have turned up field and gotten there or could have fought for it. I also think that Georgia linebacker was in pretty good position to make a stop. I really wish, perfect world, you would have gotten to the second read. And the second read would be the crosser from the other side of the field coming across. Because the way it works is you scan right across the field. So he's starting to his right with the flat route. I've got the crosser coming my way. Then I've got like an over the ball route, and then I got the crosser the other way. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that's the read across the field. And the guy working across was Traore, and he's open. And if Shapen is able to notice that linebacker's gotten out there with fluff and get back to his second read, it's going to be a first down. Assuming it's an accurate pass, Traore catches the ball, it's there for a first. And that's not even one he's got to run after catch. He's got the yardage as it is. I understand why Shapen threw to Fluff. There's a chance Fluff could have converted there. I think that, like, perfect world, you see the linebacker and you get to your second read on that play. But I also get why we wanted to get the ball out, because the other thing here, you're expecting third down, man coverage, defense is probably bringing some pressure, trying to get the ball to the quarterback's hand quickly. That's all the more reason to want to throw to your first read. But I think the play's there. I think better execution. Like, either Fluff catches the ball and you have a chance, or if Shapen gets to the second read, it's a first down. The play call was there. I saw people on the message board upset. Like, this is twice now Levy has said he loved the call on fourth down or loved a play call that backfired. The one against Florida, I understand. And I guess you could say maybe, my talk about aggressiveness is different here than that Florida game. The Florida one, that's a situation where you're in position. If you run the ball, 100% I have a chance for the win. For the win, not just we can keep this thing close. I can win the football game, and I will have a chance to win the football game. This one against Georgia, this is early enough in the game, and situationally, I think it made sense to go for it. And it was there, and I think the call works. Do I know State punches in the end zone? No, but you would have given yourself a better opportunity. I think it was the correct call. I do not blame Jeff Levy, whatsoever for going for that fourth down. Quarterback situation of it all. And then we'll close out talking defense, which is not a lot to talk about on defense, I'll be completely honest. And actually, let's do that first. Instead of doing quarterback, let's talk defense, because the defense part is a little bit more the quarterback's more big picture stuff. Look, early in the game, I thought state safeties were playing well. Brian Lanier made some really nice plays. Jerron Manning looked fantastic. Isaac Smith getting involved, obviously, with a fumble recovery. Like I said, I don't think it was a fumble, but it was ruled a fumble. It's going to be in the stat book as a fumble. But that was kind of it. I mean, Kelly Jones did his thing. Kelly Jones was perfectly fine in coverage. I don't know if he gave up a completion all day. He was really good. But State just got whipped up front. I was surprised Georgia was throwing the football as much as they were. I do not know why they weren't just running the football every single play, because State just couldn't handle it up front. They were getting whipped. And you just saw the defensive line is just not there against a unit as good as Georgia's offensive line, a team that runs the football as well as Georgia, a team that's good enough for running to the edge the way Georgia is. That was something State just was not able to handle all that well in this game at all. Georgia was just dominant up front. And, there was a few times State looked like they were able to get some pass rush, but couldn't get home. But again, Georgia doesn't give up a ton of sacks either. I just think State's defense, I talked about it earlier. I don't know what else Coleman Huxter was supposed to do in this game. I don't know game plan-wise. I don't know what the adjustment would be for defeating all those edge runs, because if you can't shut the edge, what are you supposed to do? I just think you got beat by a team that was much better. And I do think losing the safeties hurt you a lot worse that you did, because, those guys get involved in the run fit so much and are put into positions where, hey, you got to be the guy to stop the ball carrier. So those guys going down hurt you. In the Georgia passing game, it hurt you as well, because we talk about Georgia being a team that wants to throw to their tight ends. They want to throw to Zach Branch. Those are guys in the slot. So those are guys your safeties are getting coverage against, and they were really able to pick on them throughout the game. So, yeah, the injuries really hurt you there. And the ejection, obviously, to Jerron Manning, which at least you're going to get him back for the full game against Missouri, since it was the first half. That's the silver lining there. Now, the last drive of the first half, where you give up the touchdown, the panic there, that is, if you want to be mad about Levy for something in this game, that is bad game management for sure. This is the one where I will be fair, and I will agree with people. Poor management. I want to pull up the drive to see I don't even remember what the score was. I don't know if it was still 17-7 in that moment. I think it would have had to have been, because they had 24 at the half. Yeah, so You have Georgia after some multiple penalties, and it's going to be – where's the stupid thing at? I'm trying to find it. There it is. Yeah, 30 seconds left. Georgia's at the Mississippi State 38. It's a 3rd and 3. It's a 4th and 3, actually. Georgia looks like they're going to punt it. They first show that they're going to punt. Then they run those guys off the field and come in and bring out their offense. Well, first of all, if you're Mississippi State takes a timeout, right? State didn't have 10 men on the field. Our State had 10 men on the field. They were not set. They take a timeout. If you're Mississippi State, you have the ability to sub there. You don't have to hurry. You can substitute and you can take your time and you can force Georgia into a delay a game or force them to use one of their own timeouts. So first of all, you didn't have to even hurry that up. So you mishandle that to start with. Then there's the fact that you jump off sides. You've got to know what they're doing in that situation. You've got to know they are not even looking to run a play. You cannot jump in that moment. They are just trying to draw you off. That's it. So failing in that moment, that is poor. Like that is a big screw up in a big moment, which they've had a lot of this year, falls back on coaching. The decision to take the timeout instead of just substituting normally and forcing Georgia into their own bad position. That's a poor coaching decision. That is poor game management from MSU. Of everything that happened in this game. And that is one where theoretically, if you get a stop there and you're down 10 at the half, this could have still been a game that you were in. I don't think it would have mattered, all said and done. That is one where I think you botched it from a game management standpoint. The 4th down, I've already laid it out. I fully agree with going for the 4th down. I think you botched the game management there, though, with the handling of that and with the penalty. That was a moment where State had to be better. No doubt about that. As for the quarterback thing, to kind of close this out here, oh my goodness, Oregon. You're going to lose to Iowa? Is that really a thing you're going to do? We're going to try to watch the end of this as we do the show. There's like one person in here right now, which, hey, appreciate you. Thanks to you. So I don't really care about making this all professionalized. So Camario has to come in for Blake. And I already talked about the way they handled some of it earlier in the game. I didn't like the moment they brought him in when State was down in Georgia territory the second time. But obviously he has to come in the game. Blake leaves with an injury. Comes back at the half. Levy basically says, all right, that's going to be it for you. Levy did say afterward Blake wanted to go back in the game, but he felt it was best. First of all, correct decision. You're getting blown out. No reason to put Blake in that moment. And further risk of further injury. You're not winning that game. Give Camario the second half. Let him see if he can figure anything out and prove that he's going to be the guy. Well, we know he's going to be the guy, but you know what I mean? Like, get the valuable reps, get learning experience against a really good defense. Camario did a few nice things. The inaccuracy is certainly a big thing with him. As we know, that's a part of the game that has to develop and come along more. But look, I mean, Camario Taylor, you see the athleticism, you see some of what he's able to do for State in terms of helping the run game. He connected on a beautiful pass to Brendan Thompson to give you a chance there. So, look, the deep passing game is still there. I guess the question for if you're Mississippi State is what is ultimately more valuable for you as an offense going forward? Having the ability to execute a 2-minute drive where, it's the drop back pass game and all that comes with that versus maximizing your run game and your passing game basically being nothing but deep shots down the field. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the best answer is because I still think Blake hits the deep shots at a high enough clip that having him for what he can do for the passing game probably still maximizes your ability. And I look at some of these games you're going to be playing the rest of the way, and I think you need to be able to have some of this for some of those different moments that you're going to be in terms of, like, State's still got a chance to go to a bowl. right? I think if you were completely ruled out of being bowl eligible, I could kind of maybe a little bit more understand just saying, all right, look, let's turn the reins over, move forward. I understand saying, though, we need the quarterback who gives us the best chance of win because we got 2 games left. We think we can win and we can get bowl eligible. That said, look, there's a spark Camario brings. I don't know if I can give you an answer here. I'm going to have to think this over. This might be more of a talking point come Monday. Is this the turning point? Is this the one where we set forward and just say Camario Taylor is going to be the guy for Mississippi State football? Not just for this year, but we are going into the offseason. We've seen what this guy can do, and we have laid a foundation. That's the guy for the future. That's a big question. Jeff Levy's got a big decision this week, which I say that. If Blake Shapen's good to go, I think we all know what's going to happen. It's going to be Blake Shapen. I don't have any doubts that that's going to be the approach that Levy ultimately takes. Watching here's Iowa. Oregon kicks what's probably a game winner. So we'll see if Oregon just survived. I don't think Levy will put Taylor in as the quarterback moving forward, if Shapen's able to go. But, look, you have to weigh. Do you think your offense is more consistent? If we're going to look, Kamar Taylor deserves credit for this, man. Like, he's led 4 touchdown drives now in the last 2 games. While let's see, it was 2 or 3 drives go for touchdowns against Arkansas, and then how many drives did he have against Georgia? And I know it's the second half, it's a blowout, but still, see 1, 2, 3, 4 touchdowns and 2 touchdowns and 4 drives. So 4, 3, 7, 4 of. I'm doing math. It's very simple math. Kamaro Taylor has been Mississippi State's quarterback for 4 of 7 drives in the last 2 games. You scored 7 drives in the last 2 games. You've got 4 touchdowns. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. The guy finds a way to make plays. And maybe a bit of a higher clip than you've been hitting on in other moments. That's going to be a big talking point this week. And that's definitely something I think we'll want to get into on Monday. As Mississippi State looks to take on Missouri, who's about to take a loss to Texas A&M. Mizzou kept that thing competitive for a bit, but ultimately I think A&M kind of was sort of always in control of that one. So that'll be a big game. Mississippi State, right? Banged up Missouri team that's kind of had some flaws. Is this the game Mississippi State's able to go and finally get their 6th win? We'll have to see. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Really appreciate that. Oh, thank you for being here. I think you were the only one in the show today. So, and that's fine. Again, 5 o'clock and now 6 o'clock. That's a terrible time to be doing the show, but it's what worked for me today. So, yeah, we'll talk a lot about the quarterback situation going forward. Again, just to close out, big picture, am I freaking out over this game? No. I understand why it happened the way that it did. It's far more a product of the team that you're playing than it is an indictment that Mississippi State football is in some terrible spot right now. The program has been in a terrible spot, but you're building out of it. Still got a chance. I still think they're going to have a chance these last 2 games. We'll see if they can find a 6th win. I still maintain you need to get to 6th. I'm not going to be happy if they're not. But this game going the way it didn't really change much for how I view things the rest of the way. If you haven't already, leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword, Hail State.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.